The stars had always been cold and uncaring, but tonight they seemed even darker than usual as the massive fleet of the Silithran Dominion hung in orbit above. The peaceful world of Thesan Prime like a swarm of hungry locusts waiting to devour. Everything below them, Commander Velkith stood on the bridge of his flagship, his compound eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of the planet. Beneath him, as his mandibles clicked together in satisfaction at the sight of such easy prey waiting to be conquered. The Sani were a gentle species, four-armed herbivores who had never known war and had never needed to learn how to fight because they believed the Galactic Concordat would always protect them from harm. They were wrong about that belief, and their mistake would cost them everything they held dear. 3,000 warships filled the space around the planet, each one carrying soldiers and weapons, designed for conquest and destruction without mercy or hesitation. The invasion had begun just 6 hours ago, and already the capital city was burning with fires that could be seen from orbit as Silithran ground forces marched through streets filled with screaming. Civilians Velth watched the chaos unfold on his tactical display and felt nothing but cold satisfaction at the efficiency of his forces as they swept aside all resistance like a strong wind, scattering dry leaves. "Commander," one of his officers called out, "we are detecting a distress signal from the planet's surface broadcasting on all emergency frequencies across the sector. Let them call for help." Velkith replied with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. The Maris Concordat fleet is 17 days away at maximum speed, and by then this world will belong to the Dominion forever. He was right about the Concordat fleet being too far away to help in time, but he had made a critical error in his calculations that would soon become clear. The distress signal, a simple SOS repeated over and over again in the Universal Emergency Code, traveled outward from Thesan Prime at the speed of light in every direction. It passed through asteroid fields and around gas giants and between the cold spaces where nothing lived and nothing moved except the endless drift of cosmic dust, and then it reached an unexpected receiver that Velkith had never considered in all his careful planning. The UES Prometheus was a human exploratory vessel, a sleek frigate designed for long-range survey missions in the outer reaches of known space where few other species dared to venture. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in her command chair reviewing routine scan data when the communication officer suddenly straightened in his seat with an expression of alarm on his face. "Captain, we are receiving an emergency transmission from the Thesan system," he reported. "It appears to be a planetary distress call indicating a large-scale military invasion in progress." Vasquez felt her stomach tighten as she processed this information and considered what it meant for the innocent people on that distant world. She was 43 years old, with gray streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights spent worrying about her crew and her mission. "How far are we from that system?" she asked, already knowing she would not like the answer. "2 systems away, Captain," her navigator replied. "We could reach them in approximately 14 hours using our emergency jump drives." First Officer James Okonkwo pulled up tactical data on the main view screen, and what it showed made everyone on the bridge fall silent with the weight of what they were seeing. Preliminary scans indicate approximately 3,000 hostile vessels in orbit, he said in a calm voice that betrayed none of the tension he must have been feeling. "The attacking force appears to be Silithran based on their ship configurations and energy signatures. 3,000 ships against one small frigate with a crew of 200 souls who had signed up for exploration and science rather than combat and war. Odds were not just bad. They were laughable in their impossibility." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chun, the tactical officer, shook her head slowly as she studied the numbers on her console. "Captain, we cannot fight that fleet," she said. "Even if we had 100 ships like the Prometheus, we could not win a direct engagement against those forces." Vasquez knew Chun was right about the mathematics of the situation, But mathematics had never been the only factor in human decision-making throughout their long and bloody history. She thought about her grandmother, a woman who had survived the Third Pacific War and had told young Elena stories about what happened when good people chose to do nothing in the face of evil. She thought about the Dasani, a species she had only met once at a diplomatic function years ago. Gentle beings with soft voices and kind eyes who had offered her strange purple fruit and asked curious questions about Earth. She thought about what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of species who saw her kind as dangerous monsters to be feared and avoided whenever possible. The Galactic Concordat had classified Earth as a Class 7 Deathworld centuries ago when they first made contact with humanity and realized what kind of environment had shaped this strange aggressive species. High gravity that made human bones dense and muscles strong beyond what most species could achieve. Extreme weather patterns that had forced humans to adapt and survive in conditions that would kill other beings in hours. Apex predators around every corner. That had taught humanity the value of cooperation and violence in equal measure. A biosphere so hostile and competitive that simply existing on Earth required a level of toughness that other species found disturbing. Humans were tolerated in galactic society but never fully accepted because the other species could sense something in them that triggered ancient prey instincts buried deep in their genetic memory. They looked at humans and saw predators. Wearing the mask of civilization, Vasquez stood up from her chair and looked around at her crew, at the faces of men and women who had chosen to venture into the unknown because they believed in something greater than themselves. "I know what the odds are," she said. "I know that we are one ship against an armada, and that logic says we should turn around and pretend we never heard that signal calling for help." She paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "But somewhere on that planet, children are hiding in basements while soldiers burn their homes, and parents are dying trying to protect families who have never known violence before today." Master Sergeant Diego Reyes stepped forward from the back of the bridge where he had been listening with his arms crossed over his broad chest. He was the leader of the ship's Marine contingent. 24 soldiers trained in the most demanding combat schools Earth had ever produced. "What are your orders, Captain?" he asked with a slight smile that suggested he already knew what she was going to say. Vat his eyes and nodded once, in acknowledgement of the unspoken understanding between them. "Signal the crew to prepare for combat operations," she commanded. "We are going dark and entering the Thesan system under full stealth protocols." Okonkwo raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he began entering commands into his console to shut down all active emissions from the ship. And Sergeant Reyes, Vasquez added, "Get your Marines ready for a surface deployment." 24 Marines against an invasion army? Chun asked, disbelief evident in her voice. Reyes just smiled wider as he turned to leave the bridge. "Those poor bugs have no idea what is coming for them," he said. The Prometheus powered down her running lights and active sensors and became a ghost drifting through the darkness between the stars. Humanity had heard the call for help, and humanity was answering. The Deathworlders were coming. The Prometheus slipped into the Thesan system like a shark gliding through dark waters. Silent and patient and hungry for the hunt that was about to begin, Captain Vasquez had ordered the ship to emerge from its jump behind the largest moon of the system's outer gas giant, using the massive planet's radiation belt to mask any residual energy signatures from their arrival for 6 hours. They drifted in the cold shadow of that frozen moon, while sensors gathered intelligence on the enemy fleet and ground positions below. The picture that emerged was grim, but not hopeless for those who knew how to read between the lines of tactical. Data Commander Chun stood before the assembled senior officers in the main briefing room, her face illuminated by the holographic display showing the planet and the positions of Silitharan forces. "The enemy has deployed ground troops to 3 major population centers. she explained while highlighting each location with a gesture. Their primary concentration is in the capital city of Dasara, with secondary forces holding the agricultural hub of Vondri and the coastal settlement of Marith. She zoomed the display to show the orbital disposition of the enemy fleet. The ships maintain a standard defensive grid, optimized against conventional assault from space, she continued. They have positioned sensor buoys at regular intervals around the planet to detect any approaching vessels. First Officer Okonkwo studied the display with narrowed eyes as he calculated approaches and angles in his head. They are expecting a fleet response from the Concordat, he observed. All their defenses are designed to counter large-scale naval engagement with multiple capital ships. Exactly, Vasquez agreed. They have prepared for the kind of war that other species fight, with big ships and organized battle lines and predictable tactics, she smiled. And there was something sharp in that expression that made even her own officers feel a slight chill. They have never fought humans before, Master Sergeant. Reyes stood against the wall with his arms folded, flanked by his two senior squad leaders, Corporal Maria Santos and Corporal Thomas Blackwood. Tell me about the ground situation, Reyes requested. What are we looking at for enemy numbers and positions? Chen pulled up detailed scans of the capital city, showing Silitharan troop movements and defensive emplacements. Approximately 50,000 ground troops total across all three locations, she reported. They have established command posts in captured government buildings and are using the Sani civilians as labor to construct fortifications. 50,000 enemy soldiers against 24 human marines. The numbers were so absurd that Santos actually laughed out loud before catching herself. I apologize, Captain, she said. But those odds are insane, even by our standards. Vasquez shook her head. We are not going to fight 50,000 soldiers in open combat, she said. We are going to make them afraid of the dark. She turned to the main display and began outlining the plan that had been forming in her mind since they first received the distress signal. The Silitharans are an insectoid species with a virus with hive-based social structure, she explained. Their soldiers follow orders from their commanders without question, and their commanders follow orders from the central command structure without deviation. She highlighted the main command post in the capital city. Remove the head and the body becomes confused, she said. They will not adapt. They will not improvise. They will simply mill around waiting for orders that never come. Reyes nodded slowly as understanding dawned in his eyes. Surgical strikes against command and control targets, he said. Hit them fast. Disappear before they can respond. Then hit them somewhere else. Exactly, Vasquez confirmed. We turn this into the kind of war humans have always excelled at. Small unit tactics in hostile terrain against a numerically superior enemy. She zoomed the display to show the planet's weather patterns. Thesan Prime has violent electrical storms that sweep across the continental regions every 12 hours. She noted. The Silitharans have grounded all air support during these storms because the lightning interferes with their navigation systems. Blackwood grinned as he understood what the captain was suggesting. We drop during the storms, he said. Come in through weather that would kill any sane pilot and hit the ground while they think the sky is impassable. Human pilots trained in Earth's hurricane zones can handle these storms, Chun added. The Silitharans have no frame of reference for that kind of capability. The plan continued to take shape as each officer contributed their expertise and knowledge the Marines would deploy in 4-person fire teams, each responsible for a specific type of target. Team Alpha under Reyes would strike command posts and eliminate. Leadership targets. Team Beta under Santos would hit supply lines and logistics centers. Team Gamma under Blackwood would destroy communication relays and sensor stations. Team Delta would remain in reserve as a quick reaction force for emergency. extraction, or unexpected opportunities. Between strikes, they would fade into the civilian population with help from the Lasani themselves. We need local support, Vasquez emphasized. The Lasani know this planet better than any scan data can show us, and they have every reason to help us drive out the invaders. She turned to her communications officer. Can we establish contact with any organized Lasani resistance? The young officer nodded eagerly. I have detected encrypted transmissions coming from the underground shelter network beneath the capital, he reported. It appears that some Lasani leaders survived the initial assault and are coordinating civilian evacuation through old tunnel systems. Make contact, Vasquez ordered. Let them know help has arrived. The next several hours were filled with frantic preparation as the Marines checked weapons and equipment while the ship's crew loaded drop pods and calculated insertion trajectories. Reyes gathered his 24 soldiers in the cargo bay for a final briefing before deployment. They were a diverse group, men and women from every corner of Earth, united by their willingness to walk into impossible situations and come out the other side alive. Listen up, Reyes said, his voice cutting through the quiet murmur of last-minute preparations. I am not going to lie to you about what we are walking into down there. He paused and looked at each face in turn, seeing no fear but only the calm readiness he had come to expect from his team. There are 50,000 enemy soldiers on that planet and 24 of us, he continued. By any rational calculation, we should not even be attempting this mission. Santos raised her hand with a slight smirk. When have we ever been rational, Sergeant? Quiet laughter rippled through the group. Breaking some of the tension, Reyes allowed himself a small smile before continuing. We are going down there to do what humans have always done best, he said. We are going to make the enemy afraid. We are going to make them see shadows in every corner. And we are going to remind them why the galaxy calls Earth a death world. He picked up his rifle and checked the chamber with practiced ease. Remember your training, he said. Strike fast, strike hard, and disappear before they can react. We are not trying to win a war tonight. We are trying to plant the seeds of terror that will grow into their defeat. Blackwood spoke up from the back of the group. What about the civilians, Sergeant? Reyes nodded at the question. The Lasani are under our protection now, he said firmly. Any Marine who sees a civilian in danger will provide assistance regardless of tactical considerations. That is not negotiable. He looked around one more time at the faces of his soldiers. We are the monsters that other monsters have nightmares about, he said. Tonight we show the Silitherans why humanity earned that reputation. The first drop pod launched into the howling winds of a planetary electrical storm, its occupants experiencing forces that would kill most galactic species within seconds inside that shaking metal coffin. Sergeant Reyes and his team rode the lightning down to the surface. With hearts pounding and blood singing with the ancient human joy of the hunt, they hit the ground running and vanished into the rain-soaked darkness of an alien world. The wolves had arrived, and they were very hungry indeed. The first Silitharan outpost fell in 17 minutes, and Commander Kethvol never even saw the attackers, who destroyed everything he had worked to build. He was a proud officer of the Dominion, assigned to hold the agricultural hub of Vandry, with 3,000 soldiers under his command. The facility had been easy to capture because the Zani farmers who worked there had surrendered without resistance, their forearms raised in terrified submission as Silitharan troops marched through their fields and homes. Kethel had established his command post in the largest building, a grain storage facility that gave him clear sightlines in every direction. His soldiers patrolled the perimeter in regular rotations while automated sensors watched for any sign of approaching threats. He felt secure in his position, confident that nothing could threaten his forces without being detected long before it arrived. Then the lights went out. The power grid failed without warning, plunging the entire facility into absolute darkness that even Silitharan compound eyes could not penetrate. Aketheville shouted orders for emergency lighting. But before his soldiers could respond, the screaming began. It came from the outer perimeter first. Sharp cries of surprise and pain that cut through the darkness like knives. Then it spread inward, moving faster than any enemy force had a right to move, jumping from position to position in ways that made no tactical sense. Kthevol drew his sidearm and pressed his back against the wall of his command post, his antennae twitching frantically as they tried to detect any scent or vibration that might warn him of approaching danger. He heard nothing, smelled nothing, felt nothing until a hand closed around his throat from behind. "Do not move," a voice whispered in accented but understandable Silitharan. "Do not speak, do not call for help." Something sharp pressed against the soft chitin of his neck, right where the major nerve clusters ran closest to the surface. "Blink twice if you understand me," the voice commanded. Thivil blinked twice, his compound eyes clicking in the darkness. "Good," the voice said. "Now you are going to answer some questions about your command structure and troop deployments. And if you lie to me, I will know. 20 minutes. Later the lights came back on and Silitharan. Reinforcements poured into the facility to find it completely compromised. Every officer above the rank of squad leader was either dead or incapacitated. Every communication device had been destroyed. Every piece of tactical data had been erased from the computer. Systems and Commander Kethvol sat in the center of the command post, his mandibles shattered and his antennae severed, repeating the same phrase over and over in a voice that trembled with something no Silitharan had ever felt before. "They hunt like nothing I have seen," he said. "They move like shadows and strike like lightning, and they feel no fear. They feel no fear at all." Word of the attack spread through the Silitharan occupation force like poison through blood, carried by frightened soldiers who whispered to each other in the dark. Similar strikes occurred across the planet over the following days, each one more devastating than the last. A supply convoy of 30 vehicles disappeared into a canyon system and was found 3 days later with every driver dead and every container of food and ammunition destroyed. A communications relay station exploded without warning, taking out the primary link between ground forces and the orbital fleet. Command bunkers guards were discovered unconscious and bound with strange thin cord, their weapons disassembled into component parts that were scattered across a kilometer of terrain. At each site, the attackers left the same calling card, a small piece of cloth in the colors of a flag that Silitharan intelligence could not identify no matter how hard they searched their databases. The Dasani civilians began to whisper about the shadows, unseen saviors who came in the night to strike down the oppressors and then vanished before dawn. Elder Dasanri was the oldest surviving leader of his people, a gentle being who had lived for over 200 years and had never witnessed violence until the Silitharans came to destroy his world. He had led thousands of refugees into the ancient tunnel networks beneath the capital city, passages that had been built long ago for purposes his people had forgotten now. Those tunnels sheltered the frightened survivors, while the invaders above burned and killed without mercy. When Captain Vasquez first made contact through the underground communication network, the Zanri had been terrified. He knew what humans were, knew the galactic classification of their homeworld, knew the stories that other species told about the Deathworlders from Earth. The desperation overcame fear, and he agreed to meet with the human commander in a hidden chamber deep beneath the city. What he found there surprised him more than anything else. In his long life, Vasquez came alone and unarmed, a gesture of trust that the Sanri had not expected from a supposed monster. She was smaller than he had imagined, barely reaching the middle of his chest when they stood face to face. Her skin was smooth and brown, her eyes dark and warm, her voice soft and careful as she explained what her people were doing on his world. "We heard your call for help," she said simply, "and we came." The Sanri's forearms moved in a gesture of confusion. "Why?" he asked. "Your people owe us nothing. We have never traded with Earth, never allied with your government, never even spoken to a human before the war." Vasquez smiled, and there was something sad in that expression that made the Sanri's hearts ache. "Because someone was hurting innocent people," she said, "and we were close enough to do something about it." She reached out and gently touched one of his arms. "I know what the galaxy says about humans," she said. "I know they call us monsters and predators and Deathworlders. And maybe they are right about some of that." Her eyes hardened as she continued, "But we get to choose who we are monsters for. And tonight we choose to be monsters for you and your people." Over the following days, the Sanri watched the humans operate with growing amazement and respect. He saw soldiers who could have been terrifying killers treat wounded Dasani children with gentle hands and soft voices. He saw warriors share their own rations with hungry refugees even though supplies were desperately limited. He saw men and women risk their lives to rescue civilians trapped in burning buildings while Silitharan snipers tried to shoot them down, and he saw those same gentle people transform into something terrible. When night fell and they went out to hunt the invaders one evening, he found Vasquez sitting alone in a quiet corner of the tunnel network, tears running down her face as she stared at a small device in her hands. "Captain?" he asked softly. "Is something wrong?" She wiped her eyes and showed him the device, which displayed the image of a young human male with a bright smile. "Corporal James Chun," she said. "He died last night covering the retreat of his team after an ambush." He was 23 years old. The Sanri sat beside her in silence for a long moment. "Why do you weep for a soldier?" he asked. "Surely death in battle is expected in your profession." Vasquez shook her head. "Every one of my people is precious to me," she said. "Every life lost is a universe that will never exist, dreams that will never come true, children who will never be born." She looked at him with eyes that burned with fierce determination. "That is why we fight so hard," she said, "because we know the value of every single life, and we refuse to let the enemy take any more than we can prevent." The Sanri reached out with all four arms and embraced the small human woman. "We were told your kind were monsters," he said quietly. Vasquez returned the embrace. "We are," she replied. "But we choose what kind of monsters to be." Outside in the darkness above, shadows moved through the ruined streets of the capital city, hunting the hunters who had dared to threaten the innocent. The Deathworlders were showing the galaxy exactly what they could do when properly motivated, and the Silitharans were learning to fear the night. Commander Velketh was not a fool, and he had not risen to command 3,000 warships by ignoring problems until they destroyed in 17 outposts lost in 8-day supply lines in chaos across every occupied territory, morale crumbling among soldiers who whispered about ghosts and shadows and monsters that could not be killed. Something had gone terribly wrong with his invasion, and Velketh was determined to find out what. He summoned his intelligence officers to the flagship and demanded answers that none of them could provide. "We have confirmed reports of only 20 to 30 attackers operating on the planet's surface," the chief analyst reported, his antennae drooping with embarrassment at the inadequacy of his information. "They appear to be human based on the few visual sightings we have obtained." "Humans?" Velketh repeated, disbelief evident in the clicking of his mandibles. "A handful of humans have done all this damage to my forces?" "Yes, Commander," the analyst confirmed. They employ unconventional tactics that our soldiers are not trained to counter. They strike at night. They use the terrain to their advantage. They disappear before we can respond. Velkith turned to stare out the viewport at the planet below, his compound eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of an innocent world that had become a nightmare for his army. He had studied humans before the invasion began. Of course, every military commander in the galaxy knew about the Deathworlders from Earth, knew about their classified homeworld and their reputation for unpredictable violence, but knowing about something and experiencing it firsthand were very different things. His soldiers were reporting nightmares, a psychological phenomenon that Silitherans had never experienced before in their recorded history. They dreamed of eyes watching from darkness, of being hunted by things they could not see, of predators that felt no fear and showed no mercy. Some had stopped sleeping entirely, their performance degrading as exhaustion took its toll. Others had begun refusing orders that required them to venture into dark areas or isolated positions. The invasion was falling apart, and Velkith knew he had to do something dramatic to regain control of the situation. Order all ground forces to consolidate at the capital city, he commanded. We will concentrate our strength and force the enemy to come to us. Commander, that will mean abandoning our positions at Vondry and Marith, his executive officer protested. I'm aware of that, Velkith snapped. But scattered units have proven vulnerable to these human tactics. If we gather our forces together, they will not be able to pick us off one by one. The order went out across all channels, and within 2 days 60% of the Silitharan ground forces had concentrated in and around the capital city of Thesser. 30,000 soldiers, packed into defensive positions, supported by heavy weapons and armored vehicles and constant aerial surveillance. Let the humans try to strike that formation. The trap was obvious to anyone with military training, and Captain Vasquez saw it immediately when the enemy began their redeployment. He wants us to attack his concentrated forces, she said during the briefing with her Marine commanders. He thinks numbers will protect them from our tactics. Sergeant Reyes shook his head slowly. Attacking that position head-on would be suicide, he said. Even with everything we have done so far, we cannot take on 30,000 soldiers in a prepared defensive position. Lieutenant Commander Chen smiled in a way that made the others in the room slightly nervous. We do not need to attack 30,000 soldiers, she said. We just need to attack one. She pulled up data on her tablet and projected it onto the main display. I've spent the past week studying Silitharan psychology using Concordat databases and captured documents, she explained. Their hive-based social structure has a critical weakness that we can exploit. The display showed a diagram of Silitharan command hierarchy. Silitharan soldiers are genetically programmed to follow orders from their superiors without question. Chum continued, they do not think independently. They do not adapt to changing circumstances. They simply execute whatever commands come down from above. She highlighted Commander Velkith's position in the hierarchy. Remove the command structure, and the soldiers below will fragment into competing subgroups, she said. Each minor commander will try to assert dominance over the others, and they will spend more time fighting among themselves than coordinating against us. Reyes leaned forward with interest. You want us to hit the command post directly, he said. Cut off the head. Exactly, Chung confirmed. One surgical strike against the enemy leadership will do more damage than 100 attacks against regular troops. Vasquez studied the tactical display showing the layout of the capital city and the position of the Silitharan command center. How do we get a team inside? She asked. They must have that building locked down tight after everything we have done. The Zani advisor who had joined the briefing stepped forward with a hesitant gesture of his forearms. There may be a way, he said quietly. The capital city was built on top of a much older settlement, and the original drainage systems still exist beneath the streets. He produced a worn data crystal and inserted it into the display terminal. My ancestors kept records of these tunnels, he explained as ancient maps appeared on the screen. Some of them run directly beneath the building the Silitherans are using as their command center. Reyes studied the tunnel maps with growing excitement. They would not have mapped these old systems, he said. They probably do not even know they exist. Even if we get inside the perimeter, we will still be outnumbered 100 to 1, Santos pointed out. Then we make sure we do not fight 100 enemies, Reyes replied. We go in small, we go in quiet. And we complete the mission before they even know we are there. The assault team consisted of just 4 Marines, Reyes, Santos, Blackwood, and a specialist named Private Yuki Tanaka, who had a gift for electronic warfare. They descended into the ancient tunnels 3 hours before dawn. Guided by the old Dasani maps and their own enhanced night vision equipment, the passages were narrow and cramped, filled with centuries of accumulated debris and the strange, organic smell of alien fungal growth. For humans who had trained in the cave systems of Earth, it was almost comfortable. They emerged through a forgotten maintenance hatch inside the command center's perimeter, bypassing 10,000 soldiers without being detected by a single one. The building itself was heavily guarded, with Silitharan elite troops stationed at every entrance and patrol routes covering all the main corridors. But the humans did not use the main corridors. Tanaka worked her magic on the building's security systems, creating blind spots in the sensor grid and disabling alarms with surgical precision. Reyes led the team through ventilation ducts and service passages that the Silitherans had never thought to guard because no rational species would try to move through spaces so small and dangerous. They reached the command level just as the night watch was changing shifts, a moment of confusion that the humans exploited without mercy. The guards never stood a chance. The 4 Marines moved with coordination that seemed almost telepathic, each one knowing exactly where the others would be without needing to communicate. They used the Silitharan's own architecture against them, fighting in narrow doorways that negated the numerical advantage, setting off chemical compounds that disrupted the pheromone communication the insects relied on, using strobe lights that overloaded sensitive compound eyes. In 90 seconds, they had cleared the entire floor. Reyes found Commander Velketh in the central command chamber, surrounded by the bodies of his personal guards. The Silitharan commander drew a ceremonial blade with trembling claws and assumed a fighting stance that might have been impressive against another insectoid warrior against a human marine with 20 years of combat experience. It was merely sad the fight lasted 30 seconds. Reyes disarmed his opponent with a technique that broke 3 of Velketh's clawed fingers, then put the alien on the ground with a strike to a nerve cluster that human intelligence had identified as a vulnerability. In Silitharan physiology, he did not kill the commander. Instead, he activated the command center's broadcast system and transmitted a single message in translated Silitharan that went out to every soldier on the planet. Your commander is captured, he said calmly. Your invasion is over. Leave this world or we will stop holding back. He looked down at Velketh, who stared back with compound eyes that reflected nothing but pure terror. We let you live so you can tell your people what happened here, Reyes said. Tell them about the humans. Tell them what we do to those who threaten innocent people. He smiled, and there was nothing warm in that expression. Tell them to be afraid. Outside the command center, 30,000 Silitharan soldiers received the broadcast and learned that their entire command structure had fallen just as Chen had predicted. They began to fragment. The breaking point had been reached. The Silitharan fleet hung in orbit for 3 agonizing days while chaos consumed their ground forces, and their commanders argued about what to do next, without Velketh to impose order. The sub-hive leaders fell into exactly the pattern that Lieutenant Commander Chun had predicted. each one attempting to assert dominance over the others. Through displays of aggression and political maneuvering, some demanded immediate retreat to preserve what remained of their forces and their honor, others insisted on orbital bombardment to destroy the planet and everyone on it, arguing that scorched Earth was preferable to admitting defeat at the hands of a few humans. A third faction wanted to land reinforcements and continue the invasion regardless of cost, unwilling to accept that their great conquest had been stopped by such a small enemy force. While they argued, the humans continued to operate on the planet's surface, striking isolated units and spreading fear through the demoralized Silithran army. Soldiers began deserting their posts, hiding in abandoned buildings or trying to reach extraction points that may or may not still be operational. Proud invasion force that had landed 2 weeks ago with dreams of easy conquest had become a scattered mob of terrified individuals who jumped at shadows and saw enemies in every dark corner. Commander Threxel, the highest-ranking officer in the orbital fleet, finally made a decision when his sensors detected something that changed the entire equation. The human ship revealed itself. The UE's Prometheus rose from the planet's atmosphere on a trajectory that brought it directly beneath the flagship, a single frigate emerging from hiding to challenge 3,000 warships. Threxel stared at the display in disbelief, his compound eyes widening as he processed what he was seeing. "One ship," he said, his voice carrying the clicking undertones of Silithran laughter. "They send one ship against our entire fleet. Are the humans insane?" His communications officer interrupted with a report that wiped the amusement from his voice. "Commander, the human vessel is transmitting on open channels. Put it through." Threxel ordered. Captain Vasquez's voice filled the bridge of the Silithran flagship, calm and steady and completely unafraid. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Prometheus," she said. "You have committed acts of war against a protected Concordat world. You have murdered civilians. You have faced 24 human marines and lost." She paused for a moment to let her words sink in. "We are one ship," she continued. "Would you like to discover what happens when Earth sends more?" Threxel opened his mouth to issue a contemptuous response, but his sensor officer cut him off with an urgent report. "Commander, we are detecting multiple new signatures at the edge of the system. 37 vessels inbound on high-speed approach." The display updated to show the incoming fleet, and Threxel felt something cold settle in his stomach as he read the identification. Tags UES, Vengeance UES, Remembrance UES, Endurance UES, Retribution 37. Human warships from 3 different sectors, all converging on the Thesan system in response to a distress call that had been relayed across Earth's communication network. The Prometheus had not come alone after all. It had come first, buying time for reinforcements to arrive, holding the line with nothing but courage and audacity until the rest of the pack could answer the call. Threxel remembered everything he had ever learned about Earth and the species that called it home. Class 7 Deathworld, one of the most dangerous planets ever classified by Galactic Survey. Team Psi gravity that produced beings of impossible strength and endurance, extreme weather and apex predators that had shaped a species built for violence and survival, a civilization that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times before reaching the stars, yet somehow always clawed its way back from the brink. And most importantly, a species that protected its pack with absolute ferocity. The humans considered the Thesani to be under their protection. Now attacking this world had not just been an invasion of Concordat territory. It had been a threat to beings that humanity had chosen to defend, and humanity did not forgive such threats easily. "Commander," his executive officer asked quietly, "what are your orders?" Threxel looked at the tactical display showing his 3,000 ships, and the 38 human vessels that had come to challenge them, the numbers favored the Silitherans by an overwhelming margin, but numbers meant nothing against an enemy that felt no fear, that fought with a ferocity born of millions of years of evolution, that would rather die than abandon those they had sworn to protect. He thought about the reports from the planet's surface, about soldiers driven mad by nightmares, about commanders captured in their own fortresses, about an entire invasion stopped by a handful of warriors who should not have been able to accomplish anything. "Signal the fleet," he said slowly. "We are withdrawing from this system." "Commander?" his executive officer asked in disbelief. "We cannot simply retreat. The shame will destroy our standing among the other hives." "Better shame than extinction," Frexel replied. "Look at what 24 of them did to our ground forces. Do you want to find out what 38 warships full of them will do to us?" He turned away from the viewport, unable to look at the planet that had become such a disaster for Silitharan ambitions. "Get us out of here," he ordered, "and pray that they let us go." The Silitharan fleet withdrew from Thesan Prime that same day, leaving behind thousands of abandoned soldiers who surrendered to the human Marines rather than face the jungle of their own fractured command structure elder. Marines rather than face the jungle of their own fractured command structure elder. The Zonri emerged from the tunnels for the first time in 2 weeks, his forearms shielding his eyes from the bright sunlight as he surveyed the ruins of his beloved capital city captain. Vasquez stood beside him, her uniform torn and stained from weeks of fighting, her face lined with exhaustion. "I am sorry we could not save more," she said quietly. "We did everything we could." Desanri reached out and took her hand in one of his own. "You saved everything that matters," he said. "You saved our people. You saved our future. You gave us hope when we had none." Around them, the Zani civilians were emerging from hiding to embrace each other and weep with relief and grief in equal measure. Marines who had been instruments of terror just hours ago were helping to distribute food and medical supplies. Their fierce expressions softened into gentle smiles as they interacted with the people they had fought so hard to protect. 3 of those Marines would never go home again. Corporal James Chun had died in the first week, covering the retreat of his team private. Ahmed Hassan had fallen during the assault on a communications relay, and Corporal Maria Santos had given her life holding a position so that a group of the Sani children could escape through the tunnels. Vasquez thought about their faces, their voices, their dreams and hopes that had been sacrificed on this alien world for people they had never met before. It was a price that humanity had been willing to pay 6 months later. Elder Desanri stood before the Galactic Concordat Assembly to deliver testimony about the invasion, and the response representatives from hundreds of species filled the vast chamber. Their attention focused on the gentle herbivore who had seen things that would haunt him for the rest of his long life. "I came here to speak about the humans," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "I came here to tell you what they did for my world and my people." He paused and looked around at the assembled delegates. "We were told that humans were monsters," he said. "We were told that their death world had made them dangerous and unpredictable and violent. We were told to keep our distance and hope they never turned their attention toward us." He straightened all 4 arms in a gesture of emphasis. "Everything we were told was true," he continued. "Humans are monsters. They are dangerous. They are capable of violence that would make any of us tremble with fear." The chamber was absolutely silent. "But they are not our monsters," Desanri said. "They are monsters who choose what to protect. Monsters who answer calls for help from strangers they have never met. Monsters who will die for innocent people they have no obligation to save." His voice strengthened with conviction. "When my world burned, it was humans who came to save us. When my people hid in terror, it was humans who stood between us and destruction. when we had nothing left but hope. It was humans who made that hope real. He looked directly at the human delegation seated in the gallery. They're not the monsters we should fear, he concluded. They are the monsters who stand between us and the dark. And I thank the stars every day that they heard our call. The chamber erupted in discussion. A species that had always viewed humans with suspicion began to reconsider their assumptions on Earth. Captain Vasquez accepted a medal she did not want at a ceremony she did not enjoy. She thought about the 3 Marines who had not come home, about the families who would never see their loved ones again, about the cost of doing what was right in a universe that often rewarded doing what was. Easy Sergeant Reyes stood beside her at attention, already thinking about training programs and recruitment, campaigns and preparing the next generation for the responsibilities that came. With being human, the galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about what happened when someone threatened the helpless. Within earshot of humanity, the shadows were always listening, and the Deathworlders would always answer the call. In the years that followed, other species began to look at humans differently.